All right, the Cooper Chronicles interview series. Welcome to the channel. One of the biggest episodes yet. The man that needs no introduction, Darren Schaefer, the host of the Cooper Vortex podcast. You can also make sure you head over to his channel, Darren Schaefer. Go subscribe. He has the episodes there, and he's also got the Book of Darren is your new podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yep, definitely check him out on all those. And I don't know if there's anywhere else you want people to follow you other than that. You guys have the Cooper Vortex Twitter and the Instagram.
Yep, and we've got a Facebook page also.
So give them some likes and check that out. Of course, if there's literally any suspect you need to know, literally any author, literally anybody involved in the Vortex, you're going to find that interview over there on the Cooper Vortex podcast. I actually listened to it on Spotify. The only gripe I have there is I don't know if it limits what I'm seeing. Like, I think it might only show me the new episodes. And again, I'm pretty amateur on Spotify. So I'm not, I know you have it hosted everywhere. So there might be better spots where you can see your whole catalog there.
Wherever you get podcasts.
But I'm a Spotify guy. So what up, everybody in the house? Also, let's mention it's a double header. So Drew Beeson and Chris Williamson are going on later talking Braden and Drew's suspect and research. That's actually how I found Darren. I'm a big fan of Drew. So for the first episode of the Vortex I ever listened to were Drew. Then I got sucked into the Vortex and I had to go listen to Eric and Bruce and every other, everything else of yours that I could find. So I'll take questions in the chat. If you guys have some decent ones, shout out to everybody in the Facebook group, DB Cooper Mystery. Oh yeah, we definitely got to get into Eric's recent announcement. Did you catch his press conference the other day?
I haven't watched the whole press conference, but I've been following along with that, as you might expect.
Oh, sure. Did anybody send you the links of Oregon Live News, and did you see the picture of the suspect and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll get into that then. Hey, what's up, Drew? Yeah, and Chris Williamson has a new Cooper book. That's correct. I did see the promo he made for that, which was pretty sick.
I wrote the foreword.
Nice. Okay, there you go. So that's even more of a reason to buy it. So is it already up on Amazon? Do you know, or is it just?
I believe you could pre-order it. I think it comes out the 23rd. Don't quote me on that, but I think it comes out the 23rd.
We got Drew in the chat, so maybe we can use a lifeline if we phone a friend. Drew, are we still waiting for the release on Chris's book? And yes, it's pre-order. He just said, good stuff. Thank you, Drew. That being said, Coopercon 2022. It's at Coopercon2022.com. Go get your tickets. It's popping off next week. Of course, this is the anniversary coming up. That's why we have Darren here. And go get your t-shirt over there. So definitely looking forward to that. Definitely pumped for some of those panels. Tom K, I think Brian Ingram's there. Bill Mitchell's there. The radar technician guy, I forgot that guy's name, but you probably know it, Darren.
Cliff Ammerman.
I think he'll be there. That's why Darren's here, for when you need to remember the million names involved in this case. It's like my brain's just going to limit it, but we got the Cooper encyclopedia here, which is Darren. Scribble just said Darren Schaefer is DB Cooper. Aren't you a little bit young, Darren?
I'm a little bit young. It would be a pretty cool prank to have pulled on everyone, but
for sure. But you know a lot about it, Darren. That's questionable, man. That's and you're from out there, so that's you're stronger than some of the weaker suspects that have been presented. So
I agree.
Definitely Coopercon 2022. So yeah, that was the first question for you. Vincent Peterson is this new Eric Eulis REM crew suspect. Did you see his photograph, and do you have any thoughts on the new suspect?
I think it's an interesting suspect. I don't see much to actually link him to Cooper, other than the particles on the tie. It seems like he had reddish blonde hair, blue eyes. He's missing a pinky or missing part of his pinky.
I didn't know that.
So I don't see what truly makes him a suspect more than the evidence on the tie.
He doesn't have the jumps. He's a possible non-smoker. At least Eric wasn't able to verify that he's a smoker. So yeah, I saw Eric's press con. I did read those couple articles that dropped. Definitely interesting. And we can get more into Tom K and the tie and the particles. But do you have any gut instinct on REM crew? Do you put, how much stock do you put in the particles? Like, is that a must-have for you to link a Cooper suspect?
I don't know if it's a must-have. I I could be convinced without tie particles, but it definitely helps the case. There are some suspects where it's like, well, how did he get those particles on his tie? Ted Braden, for example, a phenomenal suspect, checks every box, but then it's kind of like, well, why would he have those particles on his tie? Where for other suspects, it's the opposite. Oh, well, of course he would have these particles on his tie, but he doesn't have any jump experience and he wasn't a smoker. Mm-hmm. So I could be convinced either way. I do find the tie particles interesting because they're so specific and unique. Mm-hmm. So I think it could go somewhere, but I'm not sold on the new Peterson as being Cooper yet.
Sure. Okay, how about our jumps? Our jumps a must-have, because this preface for anybody who may not know the case as well as us, but people are always trying to tell us, as long as you get out the door, or in this case, off of the aft stairs, and you can pull, you're most likely going to touch ground. So, are you looking for more jump experience, or you kind of like wherever it leads you?
I do think you need some jump experience at least. Would you plan a daring heist where your only escape is on a high-powered racing motorcycle if you have no experience on that type of motorcycle? Yeah. No, you're not going to do that. I don't think you plan this skyjacking without the ability to parachute. Yeah, and when he puts on the military parachute as Tina's walking into the cockpit, and comments that it looks like he had put one on many times before.
Yeah, and he does. She offers him the instruction card, and he says he doesn't need it. So I definitely agree, and I've heard you make that argument before. I really don't see, I mean, unless it's like terminal illness and they told you have a week to live, I really don't see why you would go. You're talking about at night. You're talking about not the best weather. It's not the worst weather, but it's not the best weather. So yeah, I definitely see a lot of factors. Although, yeah, I what you brought up about Ted Braden, for one, I think Drew just said his dad was a machinist, and two, I have heard Lisa make an argument for that, which I think was a good one, involving the company he worked for and shipping or some trucking, something like that. I don't know, Lisa, if you can word that better than myself, feel free to, and I'll highlight your comment.
There are various ways that Ted Braden, for example, I just used him as an example, but there are ways you could potentially explain the tie particles. And not as easily as like a REM crew type link.
Yes.
Or Joe Lakich. He worked in an electronics factory or building parts. And so there's another way to explain tie particles there for him.
Sure. Yeah, no, I hear it. I mean, I know people go back and forth with the metallurgy, and everyone's always looking for some sort of explanation for the tide particles, which is definitely pretty interesting. We can kind of bounce back to that, because I want to get into I don't know how much you know about Nikki B's suspect and what those guys are coming up with. It's another REM crew connection, but I'm going to flip.
I know a little bit about that.
Yeah. We'll back our way into that, but I'm going to flip a Cooper Vortex question on the host here, who knows his stuff. Darren, how did the money get on Tina Bar?
I have no idea. I truly have no idea. I tend to think there's some sort of human intervention there. It's tough for me to believe that it fell into the water that night, or it landed on the banks of the Columbia, and then when the water rose, it picked the money up and moved it. I have no idea. It's one of the things about the case. I've had people on the show say, I almost wish that the money find never happened, because it only adds more questions to the story. It doesn't provide us with any answers.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you say that, and I do agree. I mean, I think the one thing is, I mean, doesn't it kind of answer the drop zone question, sort of? Because, you know what I mean? My whole problem with it is, as an amateur to the case, I thought obviously Cooper landed there on the bank and then buried it that night. And that problem arose when Tom K discovered the diatoms and there spring summer diatoms, and
Mm-hmm.
it obviously wasn't buried in November 71, or at least in winter 71. So that kind of blew my amateur theory out of the water. Then I realized why there's all these scientists attached to the case that are much smarter than I am, that actually look at the science. So it confused me, to say the least. But
it confuses everyone. I tried to press Tom K on, does the diatoms tell us that he survived the jump? Because of course I want to push that angle. I want to believe
100%.
that he survived the jump.
Same here.
And so Tom, because he's a professional and a serious guy, he was like, I see no evidence that links jump survivability to the diatoms on the money. And I was just like, oh, you jerk. I wanted you to say, yeah, of course, it means he survived the jump. But he's just like, no, there's no link to jump survivability in the diatoms.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if it pushes or changes the drop zone. There's been so much discussion on the flight path, and I see why people want to move it west, but I just don't personally see any evidence that the plane was traveling west. I'm willing to go, okay, the plane is a few miles outside of the flight path here, but putting it over Tina Bar, I don't see that as possible.
Sure. I mean, so it's kind of weird, because at that rate, then it's almost like, actually, I don't know if you've heard Nikki B's recent theory. He covered it on a Facebook Live with Eric, and I pressed him a little bit when he came on my show. But like, I really like what, that was my first time hearing what he was saying, that, you pretty much have between 71 to 79 to come back to Tina Bar and bury that money. I mean, so I guess it's like a decoy theory as opposed to the natural, weather phenomenon theory, which is what the documentary showed us, that it just washed there and then it just buries itself a few. I mean, I don't know, that basically makes no sense to me, like how that could actually happen. And then you have the diatoms. But I think what we're pretty much dealing with is, like, if it's not Cooper himself going back and burying it there as some sort of decoy to mess us all up, or in that sense, mess up law enforcement, which it obviously did, is that someone else found that 5,800 or part of the money and then goes back there and buries it. And again, that part doesn't really like make sense. I don't really see anyone doing it but Cooper. But I really like where Eric was going with it. The floods that are reported, in Eric's theory, it's an East Coast guy that hears about those floods, flies back there to retrieve the money, blah, blah, blah. I don't have you heard his side of it?
I have. There are a couple of different stories for how the money got to Tina Bar, and usually suspect related. Bill Rollins has a whole theory of how Joe Lakich planned his whole escape, which includes leaving some money accidentally at Tina Bar. A couple other suspects have some similar story. I actually kind of like Dwayne Weber's story, where he and Joe go on this trip through the Pacific Northwest, and he disappears when they're staying at the Red Lion, and potentially throws some of the money in a river and washes up on Tina Bar. As far as planting the money at Tina Bar for it to be found, I'm not sure if I believe that, because what are the odds that it gets found?
Yeah,
I think is low. That's not an area that's heavily trafficked. It would have been just sort of locals that knew about that spot. So if I wanted to plant money to be found, I wouldn't have done it at Tina Bar.
That's why you're on the show, because that's a great point. I'm not able to think of such things as my own. How about Scribble's theory that he likes burying the money at Tina Bar? Was a shout out to Tina Mucklow. I hear this all the time. Tina Bar is T-E-N-A, correct, Darren? And then, so how do you feel about that one, Darren?
I think it's possible. There's obviously no evidence for that.
Yeah.
I think it's even possible, if we found DB Cooper tomorrow and he's still alive to tell the whole story, there's a chance he might say, I have no idea how the money got
I was just going to say, I didn't do that. What are you guys talking about? If he stopped following it, you know what I mean?
Right.
Rewind real quick. So this is what Lisa's theory on for Braden getting the particles. 18-wheeler truck deliveries, the address Niles, Ohio, for Santisi Trucking. just miles from RMI Titanium Corporation. So, I mean, my whole issue is, even if he is delivering titanium in the truckloads, is there a way for it should be sealed in the back, right? Is there a way for those particles to spray all over his tie? So again, I'm not a scientist, but it's definitely interesting. I like Lisa's research a lot. She's kind of over there with Drew. What's up? What's up, Nikki? So Nikki's saying, even though it's Tina Bar, he said it read Tina in the past. So that's interesting.
That is true. I've seen it spelled both ways. I don't think there's much rhyme or reason for the spelling. So
it's interesting stuff. The Tina Bar find is crazy, man. It's baffling. And then I know, of course, diatoms, and then we're all going into the rubber bands, the degrading of the rubber bands, and I think that's where Nikki was going along with his theory that the Cooper or whoever rebanded. I mean, the thing is, Darren, the way they're buried with the bands and the shards, it looks intentional. It doesn't look to me, again, I'm not a paleontologist. I'm not Tom K over here. I'm, a guy that hosts a podcast, but it looks intentionally buried the way they dug it up from like what I can see. The whole dredging theory does not really do much for me. You know what I mean? That it gets stuck in the propeller, it gets whipped up there on the bank, and then it's just like perfectly buried in that stack,
oh yeah. I can't remember if it was in Tussauds book or if it's in DB Cooper, The Real McCoy, but
yeah,
there was an FBI agent that had this theory. Well, maybe an animal found the money in the woods and walked it to Tina Bar and buried it. There is a ton of different theories ranging from plausible to totally ridiculous.
Yeah, that's crazy. I haven't heard that one, but again, that's why we're having Darren on today, guys, because this guy has heard everything, man. No matter how ridiculous. I don't have too much more on Tina Bar, but if anybody else has anything for Darren in the chat, you know what I mean, we can keep them moving. I just want to ask you, does the host of the Cooper Vortex have a favorite suspect? And you could even break this down to, I know, like, you're like, if it was up to you, it would be Barb Dayton just for the
right.
story. But as far as like, if that one would be your favorite, if it was your choice, or your favorite as far as like, evidence wise or argument wise.
Barb Dayton is my favorite for the story. I 100%. Think that story would be the best DB Cooper story. And like I've said before, it's the most Portland story of all time. The infamous hijacker is a trans woman. I think that's incredible. I don't think the Barb is most likely based on evidence.
Right.
I'm very gullible, and when I start reading about a suspect, I start to immediately fall into that. Like, oh yeah, this is really interesting. This is a good lead. I find Ted Braden and Wolfgang Gossett very interesting. I think they're both two suspects where I can't really eliminate them, whereas like McCoy or Rackstraw, you can read a couple of FBI files and be like, oh, well, it's obviously not that guy.
For sure.
But with Braden and Gossett, I can't do that. I find both of them very interesting and cool guys with interesting stories.
Agreed.
Gossett became some paranormal radio host and performed exorcisms.
Oh wow! I didn't know.
He was a survivalist. Clyde Lewis claims that Gossett was his mentor. Ted Braden's whole story is amazing. Both of them are very intriguing. There is Nikki and Ryan have a new suspect they're going to announce pretty soon.
Yep.
That's very interesting as well.
I agree. Yeah. I was for sure going to ask you about that later. As far as Braden, and then also something I've heard you say before on the show is like, obviously McCoy appears to not be Cooper, even though the FBI agent who shot him declared that he was in the moment. But the fact that McCoy may have perhaps known Cooper because he seemed to make adjustments to the plan or whatever. And I think that's plausible. You know what I mean?
I think that's very plausible too. If I saw a picture of Braden and McCoy standing together, I'm sold 100%. Oh, it's obviously Ted Braden. Same with Wolfgang Gossett. Show me a picture of Wolfgang Gossett and Richard McCoy together.
Yeah.
And I'm sold. Oh, it's obviously Gossett. there is no way McCoy and DB Cooper are the same person, but I think it's really fun to explore the idea that they knew each other. Maybe they discussed this. Maybe Cooper said, hey, here's what I did, and I made these little mistakes. I think you should correct them. Because McCoy did improve on Cooper's skyjacking in a couple unique ways, but he didn't have the same demeanor or control over the situation that Cooper did, which 100%. In my opinion says it's obviously done by two different people.
Agreed. Well, he's missing a piece of his lower tongue, which creates a lisp. So I think that would have been fairly obvious for anyone who talked to him.
And had a Southern accent.
Right. That's what I was thinking as well. And never mind Morbin. I don't think he drank or smoked. So like, that's what I was saying to Eric. I was like, for all these sober guys that don't drink or smoke, they were about to have they were for sure going to be a no pull because they were going to be puking the whole way down after they went down those aft stairs. You know what I mean? Just green face. You know what I mean? Like they probably could have pulled off everything, but the smoking, the 8 or 9 butts or whatever it was, I just really don't see it happening. I do want to bring up Bruce's spec op theory, and I haven't read DB Cooper and the FBI yet, but I'm going to read it right after Skyjack. And I think this brings, I think this is like highly plausible as well, because for one, you have like McCoy in Vegas, and like we're all trying to figure out like what McCoy was doing in Vegas, although it seems like he was obviously not Cooper. And then the other guy that is on the ground, the other suspect that's on the ground in the Northwest, is that Rekka or is that Dwayne? I know there's that one guy that's supposedly drenched in rain. You can probably fill that in.
Rekka lands in Cle Elum, Washington, and he has that witness, Jeff Ossadich, the cowboy dump truck driving country music.
I think
star.
It's Rekka then, yeah. Is that the wedding thing where there is that wedding was going on in the town, so there was nobody. There was nobody. Nikki, help me out if you're in here.
No, I think that's from Klansnik in the center the night of the skyjacking. There was a wedding going on.
Yes, and so that's interesting too. But regardless, hey, get down. Regardless, with these different characters on the ground, that's in Le Center, Washington, Nikki just said. Regardless, with these different characters on the ground, it kind of like leads credence to, that possible spec op theory, or whatever you want to call it, Vietnam veterans and whatever working together in a kind of, what was the Dead Presidents? Was that the movie that was like similar to this scenario? And then there was the sighting of the small plane, and of course you have the sighting of the road flares theory. Do you have any credence to any of those?
I'm not sure if I believe the road flares thing. It was reported that somebody saw that, but it's one person.
Yeah.
If there were really flares being dropped from the aircraft or something like that, the chase planes would have called that out.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I didn't think so much it was him breadcrumbing off the aft stairs, but I thought more like perhaps once he touched down on the ground. I think Drew has vaguely covered this theory that one of Braden's contacts was like a local dude that owned a small plane, so Drew didn't want to implicate the guy, obviously, but could be possibly involved. So I was thinking it was more like an on-the-ground operation. Like, hey, when I touch down and I get to this location, I'll put out some flares and whatever, maybe to signal the small plane. That's me totally spitballing. I'm not an FBI field agent here, guys. But you know what I mean.
I'm totally open to the idea that he escapes on a small plane. I don't see any evidence for it at this time. I think it would be easier to escape on the ground. I mean, they weren't looking for him in the drop zone area for something like 40 to 50 hours later.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, it looks like Drew's going to be addressing that on his live later with Chris. So I'll be tuning into that. Drew, that sounds epic. So that's basically what I had. Unless you have anything else on any other suspect stories that you enjoyed, Darren.
Any suspect stories I enjoy? I think John List as a suspect I found really interesting. It was brought up recently. If John List had been found, would he still be a major suspect today?
I don't know if is that a recent episode? I don't know if I'm familiar with that one.
I think I discussed that with Jimmy Calhoun. Maybe I discussed it with Ryan Burns. I can't remember, but
Okay.
yeah,
No worries.
if John List hadn't been found, he still would be a suspect today.
Sure, absolutely. No, I definitely got to check out the Ryan show, and I'll be doing that soon before I head out to Coopercon. I think you've addressed this a little bit on your pod, but how about your thoughts on this upcoming DB Cooper movie? Because I'm more than willing to give you my thoughts on this. So
I am DB Cooper.
I think so there's the trailer, which I didn't think was great, but then there's the development one, the Wolf of Wall Street producers. That's the one that Tina sold her rights to, and
I haven't really seen anything from that. There is another DB Cooper movie that should be out pretty soon called I Am DB Cooper. That the Seattle Film Festival, because of COVID, they were offering some sort of virtual screening. Mm-hmm. So I actually saw that movie.
Okay.
And I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of that movie at all.
The trailer didn't look good. I'm not going to lie to you, but you've got a better idea.
It's like two bounty hunters. I hate to be bashing this project, but I'm going to anyway. So it's two bounty hunters that come across this guy who was in like an argument with his neighbor, and they track him down, and it's like he tells him that he's DB Cooper. I want to say he's like 75 years old. So it would make him 25 during the time of the skyjacking. He doesn't fit at all. His story doesn't match up. There's some scene in the movie where I believe they're trespassing on Tina Barr and get caught. And then their first thing they say to the guy is, well, we're armed. And I'm like, this is such a weird movie. And even if this guy tells you he's DB Cooper, you know, the first thing you should do is at the very least go to the Wikipedia page and be like, wow, he is wildly off on all these details. He doesn't match the physical description or the guy's age. It's ridiculous. Yeah. They could have, if they wanted to make a DB Cooper doc, they could have done something without this guy, because he's clearly in no way, shape, or form DB Cooper.
Yeah. Well, so did they try to lean into a semi-real audio biographical thing with?
Yeah, they take this guy and he's like, oh yeah, I buried the money at Tina Barr because that's where I landed, I think he says.
Yeah.
And it just.
And they're like, where's the rest of it? He was like, I don't know.
Yeah, they like show up to Tina Barr with shovels, which I really don't see a point in doing at all.
So it's like Without a Paddle 2 or something. The one I was asking you about was Not If You Understand.
If You Understand. Yeah, I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. I mean, I think Wolf of Wall Street's amazing. I mean, if they could produce it in the vein of that, it'd be interesting. I mean, I think it's a little weird having it be Tina's autobiographical story and what she's going to be the hero. So I think, I don't necessarily know if that's going in the right direction. Like me personally, I'd like to see like a dark, like crime thriller that's like a Dave Fincher Zodiac or like a Oliver Stone type of thing, like something that's more of like a 70s, you know, kind of like, you know, true crime film that really captures the era. You know what I mean?
Rob Bertrand, I had on the show, he wrote a script that I really enjoyed. And basically the whole movie is just the hijacking. There's nothing before, there's nothing after. Mm-hmm. And it's really good. I'd like to see something like that made. The problem with doing some sort of a dark thriller is you don't know who Cooper was. So you have to make him up.
For sure. Yeah.
Which could be good. I mean, yeah. Ted Braden as Cooper, you could do Ted Braden's story and it would be phenomenal. I think a really good Richard McCoy movie would be amazing. I mean, the prison escapes, driving the garbage truck out of prison with a gun made out of dental paste.
Yeah, that's awesome.
His own skyjacking, his action in Vietnam.
Yeah.
It would be an amazing movie.
For sure.
Whether or not he's Cooper, which of course I don't believe he is.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you there. Now I agree 100% with both your sentiments there. Well, I mean, look at how Dave Fincher filmed Zodiac. I mean, we don't know who the Zodiac is, and they still pulled that off. I mean, granted, unfortunately, that film was based off of the book Zodiac by Robert Graysmith, so they did lean into the Arthur Lee Allen angle, but they didn't necessarily show Allen as Zodiac committing the crimes. Now you can do lighting and certain things and obviously he wears a mask at one point, so it's a little more difficult to do that with Norjack in Flight 305, like filming the whole flight without showing his face. But who knows? Maybe there's a more creative director to me that can figure that puzzle out. You know what I mean?
Did you want to talk about DB Cooper being the Zodiac killer?
I do, but I wanted to address some of that on one of your shows because I felt there was a lot unsaid there. But what I do have a response to that, and then if your theory that you hate is there's no DB Cooper or the flight split up the money and they made up DB Cooper, the theory that I hate is Zodiac Killer is DB Cooper, because that is obnoxious and insane. Literally nothing to put that together.
It's this weird sort of desire to tie a bunch of unsolved crimes together. Because then you can do it with one person instead of individually solving 14 different crimes.
Yeah. So there are a couple more links that if we ever care to revisit the issue that I'll bring up to you that I do think there are between the cases. That being said, as far as like description and literally anything else, I mean, like they don't even have the same haircut for one. Zodiac, I guess they could be a similar height. That could be like one if you really want to stretch it, but Zodiac is like 200 to 220. DB Cooper is like a 50-year-old skinny guy, so they really don't look alike. You know what I mean? That's the biggest problem for me. You know what I mean? The
MO is completely different. The Zodiac killer killed people and didn't steal from them. Cooper stole without hurting a single person.
Without killing anyone. Right.
Wildly different.
Right. Wildly different. And I guess one that people like to really like when they're going to really dive deep and go all in that rabbit hole and put all their eggs in one basket, as Darren just said, is, well, Zodiac drew a bomb diagram one time and DB Cooper had a bomb briefcase with him. So it's obviously the same guy. You know what I mean? Like, what are you guys talking about? Like, there's literally nothing to it. No, I can't stand that one. So it's nonsense. Difficult to read the comments. So gonna put this up just I know you've talked Don Cheney with Drew before. Don Cheney was Cooper. That's Drew's Zodiac suspect, which is actually a great Zodiac suspect. But Cooper, come on, Drew. We know what you're up to. We know. and just because we're going deep with it, Lisa, Don Cheney escaped and swam from Alcatraz. Yeah, I know the whole. The three brothers? One of them Zodiac and one's
Frank
Cooper.
Morris and the Anglin brothers.
It's terrible. It's insane. Don't like it.
And he said on my show that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers killed 30,000 people. 20,000 or 30,000, something like that. But an absolutely insane number.
Yeah, serial killer. That's more like genocide. So I guess Scribble has one for you. Darren was going to quit the Cooper Vortex, but has since continued it. Darren, what makes you keep doing it?
I can't escape. I can't put it down. I would like to leave. This isn't going anywhere. I've been doing this for years and years, and 100%. I'm less certain now of who Cooper was than when I started this whole adventure, because I was certain it was Kenny Christensen. Now I have no idea. I'm constantly checking the drop zone. I'm constantly checking the DB Cooper forum. I'm constantly checking the DB Cooper Reddit. I don't know why. I think 2019 was the first year where I was like, okay, I'm done with this. I've been doing the podcast for 2 years, and
for sure,
it's time to put it away. And then I was like, well, I got to do a few more episodes, or this guy's going to come on the show, and I just read this, or this book just came out. And so I truly can't put it down. It's so true how everyone says once you get sucked into the vortex, you can't escape. And even in my time, I've seen many people leave many times and keep coming back and keep coming back.
Sure.
Only Sluggo has really truly quit the vortex and not come back.
Yeah, I've seen his old website. It's Wayback Machine or whatever, and his site was amazing. He's got so much information on there. I kind of like found out all these people super late from Skyjack and from your podcast, and kind of went back to look at all the stuff you guys were referencing. And
yeah, his website was great. He really wanted to collect all the information that wasn't debatable and have it laid out, because so much in this case is unknown or up in the air or totally debatable, that there are so few facts that we could say, yes, this happened. Yes, this happened. And it was a good resource for that. A lot of times you'll find a website done by a suspect peddler, and there are certain details in there that are manipulated or they're
skewed,
intentionally left out. Other ones are intentionally highlighted to sort of match that person's narrative.
100%.
So Sluggo didn't, to my knowledge, didn't have a suspect. So his website was pretty cool. It's not up anymore. You have to go onto the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, to see it. But there's links for that. I think the DB Cooper forum has one.
Yeah, absolutely. Scribble, I will ask that question later. This isn't the Cooper Vortex here, so we get dirty. We don't mind covering the beefs, but I don't want to focus on that. Let's see. Great job, Ross and Darren. Looks like Mark Beretta is coming out. Read the Rolling Stone magazine article. Tina Mucklow tell you what she thinks of amateur sleuths hunting her down herself. I think we're all quite familiar with that.
I want to make it clear I've never approached Tina at all. I've never sent an email to her. I've never reached out on social media or anything like that. I think if she wants to come on the show, she can reach out to me, but I'm not going to be another one of those annoying males that harass her.
Yeah, understood. I mean, at the same time, what she expect. It's essentially the biggest case in American history. So I'm sure it's annoying. That's not what I'm saying. But I think she should come on. I think you deserve it, Darren. I guess maybe after not, if you understand, if she's doing a promo run, that would be it's well deserved. Tina, if you ever see this,
I would love to talk to her.
I don't think you will, but Darren's got everybody else. He's got Bruce, he's got Larry, so everybody goes there first. That being said, Darren, what's your favorite? Well, actually, I forgot to mention, Darren is of DB Cooper, Where Are You fame from the Netflix series. I will preface that with this. It was cool to see Darren and the Vortex get their just due on the documentary. That being said, my favorite part of it, and maybe we'll ask Darren what his favorite part is next. My favorite part was that, Colbert is sitting there calling us all kooky Cooperites that we can't drop the case, and yet he's obsessed over Rackstraw with absolutely no evidence. And then, he's just going like, yeah, I got him. Come on, guys, just believe me. And we're all going like, what is the evidence, man? What is the link to Rackstraw? Because there's 4 episodes of this documentary and you haven't showed it in this or anything else previously that I know of. And then it's bringing up like Eric, Jeff, Bruce, whoever else was in that. They're all going like, okay, yeah, the case is awesome, but I think this guy got a little bit too bogged down on Colbert. So I guess what was your experience like working on the documentary, and what were your thoughts your afterthoughts?
My favorite part of that documentary was in it. You can hear me say, I've heard that Colbert offered Rackstraw money to confess to being Cooper, and then it's like smash cut to Colbert offering him money, and they have that video. I absolutely loved seeing that because I had heard that for years.
That's funny.
That they offered him money to confess, to be part of this documentary and do all that. And it was really great to see that. When I did that interview, I was surprised that they asked me so many questions about Rackstraw and Tom Colbert. And I left and I was like, oh man, is this going to be another Rackstraw doc?
Yeah. I mean, I really didn't feel it was, because it had you guys from the Vortex kind of offering the rebuttals. And that was honestly my favorite part. It was cool hearing Jeff and, everybody else kind of give their hot takes. But again, a couple of the episodes got a little too Rackstraw-y, where it was just like too bogged down. It was the way it was edited and all that stuff, the music, it had some really, really good parts to it, but it was just some of the kind of informational aspects where it was just like, if you followed this case more than a weekend, you've pretty much read your Rackstraw articles and moved on, as Darren was saying before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's funny. It's funny for me, real unfortunate for Tom Colbert, that both Rackstraw docs that have come out, the History Channel DB Cooper Case Closed ? And the new DB Cooper Who Are You? Both feature Rackstraw and then end with it's not Rackstraw.
So how can you spend all that time? You could do that with any suspect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, really, you could do that with almost all of them.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's why Darren's here to point these things out. I think I already asked you this, but Drew asked, "What do you think of Bruce's retirement?" I believe you covered it earlier. You said it'd be a little bit difficult for him, especially someone in Bruce's position.
We'll see. It's hard to stay away. Is he going to sort of roam around and be a mythicist? Sure, I definitely believe that. Is he going to be able to fully put this down? I'm not sure. He's going to be traveling light and getting rid of some of his DB Cooper stuff, but
for sure.
Is he going to stay? Is he going to shut down the Mountain News? Is he going to stay off the forum?
I love the Mountain News. I'm also a big UFO Sasquatch fan. So me and Bruce connect on multiple levels. It's not just Cooper for me. Bruce, I come for the Cooper, but I stay for everything.
I love Bruce. Bruce is truly an amazing person. Absolutely. And it'll be a bummer if he really does peace out of the Vortex.
Hey, question. What did you guys talk about on the Book of Darren with him? Was it, did you expand outside of Cooper and just kind of go for everything? Because I know you've done multiple.
Oh yeah. It's a great episode. Bruce, if you just stick a microphone in front of Bruce's face, he's phenomenal.
He needs his own talk show.
He's well-spoken. It's like an exciting adventure. He's enthusiastic. He has very interesting things to say. That episode I did with him, a lot of woo-woo, a lot of alien abduction.
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah.
Some ghost.
I'm gonna link that. I'm gonna link that. You know what, guys? I'm gonna link that right here just because you guys know what I do on the channel. This is Planet X Filmworks, baby. Scribble, I'm working on it. I'm trying to get Bruce on, but again, it's not that easy, guys. I should see everybody at Coopercon next weekend, so you know what I mean? I'll have my camera if anybody you know what I mean, wants to connect, shoot some, hopefully get a little vlog up on the tube for you guys. Let's see, what else do I got for Darren? One that I'm a big fan of because I'm a comic book fanboy. The Dan Cooper comic and the recent American comic strip that Ryan Burns found. Let's get your thoughts on both, starting with the Franco-Belgian Dan Cooper hero or action hero, whatever that guy is.
Well, I'm a big fan of that. I'm not sure if that's exactly where he picked the name from, but it seems quite on the nose. You have this Dan Cooper, Royal Canadian Air Force test pilot, stunt pilot, daredevil, badass. There's a comic where he disarms a bomb aboard a commercial airliner. There's one where he's pictured jumping out of an exploding airplane.
Yep.
It's very, very on the nose. I've used the example before. If a guy robs a train and escapes on a skateboard and his ticket was purchased under the name Tony Hawk, is that a random name he chose or an homage to the famous skateboarder? So I think there is something to that comic, or even potentially that little, it's almost like a pamphlet that Ryan Burns found. I want to say it's like 30 pages or something. It's not very big. It's not quite a magazine and it's not a book.
Yeah. It's like a little comic strip from another aerospace publication or aviation publication, something like that.
Yeah, and it's written in a weird way where they specifically say Dan Cooper this and Dan Cooper did that and Dan Cooper jumped out of the airplane.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I mean, my whole thing is if it's not the French Canadian one, because obviously you have the translation issue there. Although that's not like just because something is in another language, but it still has that same title. You know what I mean? That's not really like a hard stop for me. Like it could be as simple as maybe he didn't read it in French. Maybe he just saw the cover, like he saw that cover of the dude jumping out of an exploding plane. You know what I mean? Or and as far as the American comic strip, like that's what I was thinking. You know, I get Eric's argument that it's just this super common name. So it makes some sense there. Like you're just going to go up and give the most generic common name, Dan Cooper. So it's not going to come back to you. But like in my loosely researched convoluted theory, if he saw both then that's like a smoking gun. Like if he somehow saw that American commons trick that Ryan found, and then later on maybe like saw that French one, he's like, okay, I've seen it twice now, I'm going with that. You know what I mean? Like that's.
Oh yeah, and I definitely
like,
think there's something to, if he's overseas and doesn't speak the language. I've said before, you're in some sort of a waiting room. This is pre-cell phones, obviously, and he looks at the magazines and books on the table in the waiting room. He doesn't speak French. There's a comic book there. Without speaking the language, you could pick that up, look through it, and get an idea of what's happening
100%.
in there. And it's something that a young man definitely would do.
100%. And to bring it full circle into the like the Spec Op theory, I know Drew has that story about Braden taking the name of that Canadian guy who was in one of the units. Like I think when he went to the Congo, he was using that other guy's name who was like a Canadian. Then obviously Braden, I think, spent time in Belgium, if I'm not butchering that, Drew. So, and then Jay Holiday just said the French in Vietnam taught it to American pilots. Obviously, the French occupied Vietnam before the Americans arrived there. So whether it's, me, myself, I'm from New England, the Boston area. My mom's side is French Canadian. So there are some like, Francophones in New England that were before the little history lesson, guys. And Darren probably may already know this. He's pretty deep in the Vortex. But before that Canadian U.S. Border was divided, there was actually a lot of French-speaking Canadians that got divided into the U.S. side that were, that still speak, both languages. So, I mean, I could see a little crossover from East Coast Canada, but even if it's like the military guys out there, like Jay Holiday just said, the Canadian troops or the French troops, I could totally see a scenario where one of those French-speaking guys meets the American soldiers and, like you said, swap comics or, whatever, teach them, hey, this one's about this badass pilot, action guy that, disarms bombs and blows things up,
Oh, yeah.
I could definitely see that scenario. Just gonna throw this up here. Yeah, I got the old school Dougie Fresh look going on Scribble today. Let's see what else we got for Darren. Okay, so usually one of my last ones is this, Darren. I haven't heard you talk about this on the Vortex too much, but I'm sure that you have somewhere because you guys have 100 billion episodes. The DB Cooper letters. Where are you at on the DB Cooper letters? Because I know some people are like, it's a nothing burger. And then, people like Drew have like a little bit more interest in it.
I'm not sure. Definitely not all of them are from Cooper. I think some of them are certainly somebody wanting to write into a newspaper to play a joke. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
But I think the letters, if one of them is legit, I think we'll find out after we figure out who DB Cooper is. I don't think the letters can lead us to Cooper at all.
So I see what you're saying as far as like reverse engineering them via the suspect. You don't see anything in any of the letters basically that would lead you to authenticity.
No, and then Rackstraw, they had that guy who used a code.
I was just about to bring up the code.
The number at the bottom.
Yeah, his unit.
Cooper
unit.
asked for his notes back when he was on the plane, which tells me he doesn't want to leave evidence. He doesn't want to leave a trail. So the idea that he asks for his notes back and then gets back to his house wherever and then decides, I'm going to write a new letter to the newspaper in Butte and the newspaper in Portland. I don't think he would have done that. Obviously, he kept this to himself.
Yeah, right. If you pulled, landed, got away with the cash or stashed it or whatever, and then there's this massive manhunt, you avoid all of it. I mean, I think Darren makes a really good argument. Then you go back to your house to piece together these Playboy letters to mail that in to, I don't even know who they were mailed to, honestly, the government or police or whoever, the news. It seems like it's just giving more evidence when you've already gotten away with the crime. So I can understand that. However, I do like what Drew was saying about with Braden and the Uncle Sam, and that does kind of stack
there is
up.
Some interesting language in there that would be similar to what Ted Braden would say.
Sure. And that, and as well as like what I was going to say is like a Vietnam veteran, Unk taught me the skills. It does sound like a disgruntled soldier. Again, that could be a random guy writing in it. Oh, and then it says a rich, was that Drew, are you still here? Is that letter 5 or letter 6 that signed a rich man?
A rich man, yeah.
I like that because, I don't even see. Well, let's go back full circle, which is a thing I always bring up on this show. That he called himself Dan Cooper, and he bought the ticket as Dan Cooper. So when the DB Cooper newswire goes out and they get the name wrong, then he's going to write all these letters saying like, yeah, I'm DB Cooper now. Like he's just going to change it just because that's what went out on the newswire. I don't really see that happening either. You know what I mean? So.
No, I think the FBI intentionally let people believe it was DB Cooper and not Dan Cooper.
Yeah.
Because it instantly weeds people out. It was me. I confessed to it. Oh, yeah? What? Tell me what name you gave when you boarded the aircraft. Oh, I told him I was DB Cooper.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's not you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Again, guys, the FBI looked into this stuff. Things can be debunked rather quickly when people come up with these crackpot theories.
The FBI files are out now, but I still hear from people that didn't know his name was Dan Cooper, and he never used the name DB Cooper.
Right. And I take it those are not very big fans of the Cooper Vortex podcast, because I think that would be like episode 1 from you whenever you started.
Yeah, they're the people that tell me, what if he never jumped off the plane?
So since you just brought it up, that was basically my main questions, guys. You can keep them rolling, but I do have a few bonus questions. Since Darren Schaefer loves the DB Cooper never existed theory and the flight crew split up the money so much, one of my favorite parts of the Cooper Vortex is when Darren roasts and shits on this theory. So Darren, what don't you like about the DB Cooper never existed theory, and tell us why this is your favorite one, or at least
for whatever reason people will watch the new DB Cooper Who Are You documentary.
Yep.
And people brand new to the case always come up with these two theories. One, that he never existed and or the flight crew was in on it. And the second is that he never jumped from the aircraft. He either hid or walked off the plane in Reno. And every single time it's presented as a new idea. I have a new theory that I haven't seen anyone say before.
Yeah.
And they're both totally ridiculous. If you talk to people who worked for the airlines in the 60s and 70s, they will all have the same thing to say. It was an amazing job. Right. They were treated well. It was glamorous. As a young woman, you can, go to Rome for the weekend. It was a great gig, and they all loved it. So the idea that you're going to have 6 or 7 people in on this plot to get $200,000, and then whack that money up, and no one's gonna talk, and we're all gonna keep working for the airline. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's no evidence to support that. There was a couple of people in the Vortex who sort of repeated Ralph Himmelsbach saying that the people who worked for the airline industry were good people, so there was no need to look at them. Mm-hmm. That's not true at all. They did look at the people who worked for that airline, who were on the crew that night. Right. I believe it was Tina's ex-husband said that they believed they were being followed by the FBI in the days and weeks after the hijacking. There's no evidence I've seen in the FBI files or anything else that indicates any of the flight crew being involved in this in any way, shape, or form. The DB Cooper didn't jump out of the airplane. That's ridiculous. The FBI watched the plane come into Reno. That runway was cleared specifically. They had police and FBI on the ground waiting, and they immediately searched the plane with dogs. If you've been on an airplane, you know they are using every square inch of space. There isn't a bunch of extra space on an airplane to hide that they're not using. They're using all the available space in that aircraft.
Agreed.
He jumped off that plane. It's ridiculous to assume that he hid or he pulled out a fake badge and then walked off the plane. Oh, I'm FBI too.
Yeah, that's good.
It's ridiculous.
Well, like you said, we don't know who he was, so for the movie, we can have that ending. We can do whatever we want since it's.
If that's how your movie ends, I'm not watching it.
Darren's gonna throw his TV out the window, or the movie theater screen. Yeah, no, I agree with 100% all of Darren's points. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and again, guys, the DB Cooper never existed theory it's one of, if not the worst theory, with like Zodiac and Cooper right behind it.
Oh yeah, a bunch of people saw him.
How about the briefcase bomb, Darren? Real, not real? I think you asked that one on your pod from time to time.
I used to be like 99% certain the bomb was fake. Over the years, I've sort of moved my position on that. Now I'm more like 80% the bomb was fake.
Yeah.
There are a couple of times, when he's on the ground in Seattle, if you have a fake bomb, that's a really shitty weapon. It's really terrible.
Yeah.
So I think there is a good chance, or a chance, that the bomb was real. Because if he really has nothing and the plane's on the ground in Seattle and the pilots escape through the window in the cockpit, what does he do then?
Right.
Then he's trapped on this airplane with a fake bomb.
Yeah, 100%. Now, you know what? I followed like exactly your same line of thought. So I always thought like it was probably not real because he wouldn't risk like blowing up the money. But then I started talking to Nikki and started talking to Ryan, and I started to like sway a little bit because they were saying like if he gets into position like the one you just named, he gets back into a corner. Well, he uses the bomb and it takes him out. It still covers up his identity. So now like if there's no trace of him left, you're definitely not gonna find out who he was. I mean, not like we did anyway, but had the plan gone differently, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's okay. Well, those are my main questions. I know I just said that, but there are a few questions in the chat. Let's get into Scribbles. So he wanted to your beef with Dan Greider. He wanted to, if you had any thoughts on that, you can feel free.
I personally don't have any beef with Dan Greider. He got a little upset with me when I wouldn't publicly announce that I believed he had solved the case.
That's understandable.
I knew the direction he was going with his documentary before, because we had lunch together in Denver a month, 2 months before his documentary came out. He told me he had all this great evidence on McCoy, and the McCoy family was talking now, and it was really going to change my mind. And so I, took his word for it, and I agreed to keep my mouth shut until after the documentary came out. It came out, and I wasn't blown away by the evidence he produced. And then he wanted me to say publicly, like, I believe Dan Greider solved the case. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. And now he's not really a big fan of mine, but I have no problem with Dan Greider.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind the documentary. I thought, like, he tested the jump with the bag, and then, what he said, he definitely dropped the bag in midair, and it was like, dude, he tied the bag to his waist, and you didn't even show that in your documentary, for one. Two, all he did was just, like, present McCoy's children, and they were like, yeah, it was my dad. And we were like, so that was your evidence, dude? Just asking his kids and whatever. But I guess, wasn't there an issue where he copy-pasted your Cooper Vortex logo at one point? If it's a legal thing, we don't need to address it.
Yeah, it was. He appeared on another show, and he took the Cooper Vortex logo and made it say the Dan Greider Vortex. And I wasn't stoked about that. And so I reached out to the other guy in the video.
Nonsense.
I didn't file a complaint with YouTube or anything like that. I just said, hey, man, if you want to use my logo, that's fine, but don't change it to say the Dan Greider Vortex.
Yeah, credit it as my show.
Right. Yeah. So he was like, oh, thanks for reaching out. And he got rid of it right away. But Dan was very upset that I had done that. But he said that I gave him a copyright strike on his YouTube channel, which I didn't. I just reached out to the guy and said, hey, what's up with this? And he took it down right away.
Yeah, maybe someone else gave them a strike and they just blamed you or something. Who knows? So Scribble, hopefully that made you happy again. This is the Cooper Chronicles. We do everything here. We're not professional like Darren's show.
I will say this. I'll promote some of Dan Greider's stuff.
Go for it.
Dan Greider was recently on a podcast called the Grammarica podcast, I think it's called. And he says his part 2 of DB Cooper Deep Family Secrets is supposed to be out on that show. He announced the middle of this month. But as we know with his other one, it was delayed quite a few weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to part 2 of the Dan Greider documentary. I'll definitely watch it. And if he can change my mind and sell me on McCoy being Cooper, then I'm open to that.
Amazing. Well, Darren's a forgiving guy because after all that nonsense, he's still willing to watch part 2 and be open-minded about it. That's amazing.
I like Dan Greider. I have nothing against him.
For sure. This guy is more forgiving than me. You know, I'm Sicilian, so you know how that goes. Nikki B, will the vortex ever stop, Darren?
That's a good question. I've thought about this many times. If the case is solved tomorrow, tomorrow we find out that it was Neil Paulson that committed this, and he's definitely DV Cooper, and we have all this evidence. What happens then? If it's not solved to our satisfaction, then of course we have to start digging into Neil's life, and then the vortex will continue for a brief period of time after that. But I've really wondered about certain people pushing suspects. Will they concede like, hey, this is obviously Cooper. I was wrong. I was going about it the wrong way. Or will they just sort of disappear angry and not want to talk about it? It's interesting. It will be very interesting to see what happens when and if this case is ever solved. If it's not solved to everyone's satisfaction, then the vortex will still continue. Oh, we have this evidence that it was most likely Neil Paulson, but some people will, oh no, it couldn't have been him at all. I'm still leaning towards it being Ted Mayfield.
That being said, just because Nikki brought that up, how did you feel about what you've seen with Nikki and Ryan Suspect? I don't know what they've fed you, but I'm sure you've seen some things of it. How's it looking, and how are you feeling about that?
It's looking pretty good.
That's what I thought.
He's a good suspect. They're going to announce him at Coopercon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people will be very interested in what they have to say and the evidence that they've collected. I think it's interesting. And I also appreciate that both Nikki and Eric have come into this with a suspect. Nikki's first suspect was Klansnick. Mm-hmm. Eric's was Sheridan Peterson. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate the ability for them to say, okay, I've moved on. I was wrong about this. Moving on. A lot of people you put evidence in front of their face. It's not your suspect. Look at this. Look at this.
Yeah. They can't.
And they can't say, okay, I was wrong about that.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate it with Nikki and Eric being able to stay in the case and move on. I think that's very difficult. So I appreciate that they're both men that were able to do that.
For sure. Yeah, the Zodiac community is rather similar. The problem is we don't have any actual science like REM crew or tie particles that can actually point a direction. So you just have people locked into their angle forever that are never going to budge. You know what I mean? When you're like, dude, did your guy ever live in California? Like,
yeah, and I can understand it to an extent. I mean, if you put a decade worth of work into this and you have this book out that you're very proud of, I think it could be really difficult to move on and admit that you were wrong or that your book had mistakes in it.
Yeah, for sure. We'll go to Scribble. Darren, who are your dream guests for the Vortex? I would guess Tina, maybe whoever else was involved with Flight 305.
Tina, I don't know if she's a dream guest. The primary people on the plane, that's not really what my show does.
Yeah.
You know, if Tina has a crazy hot theory or take on who Cooper was, I'm much more interested in that than having her sort of tell her story, although I would definitely be interested in that as well. My dream guests right now would be Jeffrey Gray, who says he's coming on the show. One day he will be on the show.
He's coming on.
He's coming on. I've been trying to get him on for probably 3 years real seriously. And I would say in the last 18 months, I've scheduled him to be on the show a bunch of times, and it just keeps getting rescheduled. Jeffrey, if you're listening to this, let's do it. Hurry up.
I mean, he did the dog.
Other dream guests. I really wanted to have Joe Weber on. I talked to her on the phone, and I decided that it would be cruel for me to put her on air, to put a mic in front of her and have her speak freely.
Yeah.
I was really bummed when Rackstraw died because I had a feeling that he would come on the show.
Dude, I found out he was local. I'm in San Diego, so I was like, they were trying to pay him to freaking admit that he was Cooper. I would have paid him to just say, dude, just tell us you're not, and I'll put this Colbert thing to. I'll end it right now on YouTube.
Mark Zaid, the lawyer, I think he would be an interesting guest to have on the show.
Nice. Forgive my ignorance. Have you had Radicek? Because I know he's done dialogues.
No, I've heard him speak, but it's really, like I said, having the primaries on the show, that's like, are they going to speculate if the bomb was real or not? Are we going to talk about this? They more have details and less theory, and my show tends to be more theory and speculation. So I'm not certain if they'd be really great guests for what my show is.
Agreed. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, so one thing that really struck out to me, I don't know if it was your first show with Bruce, when he kind of provided this, I guess we'll call it an alternate timeline of what the FBI story is. And it surprised me because Bruce was telling you this stuff of, the FBI says this happened, as far as what Bill Mitchell going back and getting his coat and how they moved everybody around and whatnot. And Darren sitting there going, I haven't heard that before. And I'm thinking to myself, like, Darren hasn't heard this? Because like when it was coming straight from Bruce, I was like, damn, I thought Darren knew everything. So I was like, Bruce blew me away with that episode.
My very first episode of the show with Bruce was the second interview I had done. I interviewed Robert Blevins earlier that same day, and then drove to Bruce's place and did that interview. And it really did blow my mind. And he mentioned a lot of things that I hadn't heard and didn't know at the time. And also, like, I didn't really understand how to interview people. So I think that episode is really good thanks to Bruce. When I listen back to those first 5 interviews I did, it's like all I can think about are the mistakes that I made. Why didn't I follow up with this? Why did I let that slide?
Sure.
That kind of thing. I wish I could do a few of those again.
Honestly,
I'd love to have Robert Blevins on the show again. He keeps saying he's going to have his autobiography, Cooperland, come out, and I cannot wait to read that book.
Absolutely. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I wasn't nitpicking your performance at all in that Bruce episode, because what he was saying was so like astounding. And the fact that like you hadn't heard some of this stuff, like that's just what I was reacting to. So what is your take on, let's call it the FBI, kind of, what their version of events is versus what Bruce was telling you as far as like the events of Flight 305? Like, do you lean towards either one of those, or do you think it's like something in between? Because, those people get off the plane, they interview some of them, and you can see how many contradictions there are in the 302. So it's obviously like it's a very convoluted mess. You know what I mean? Like,
Bruce tends to lean more towards the FBI was incompetent and screwed some of this up.
Yeah.
I don't really agree with that. I think they definitely wanted to solve this case. And looking through the FBI files 51 years later, it's pretty easy to play Monday morning quarterback and critique some of the things they did. But
they did a lot of work.
Yeah, and at the time they did everything they could. I mean, they interviewed almost every sport parachutist in the country at the time.
Yeah.
They were talking to different people in the military. So I don't think they did anything wrong or nefarious in this. I truly believe they wanted to solve it. You know, talking with Larry Carr, I believe him that he wanted to solve the case.
Yeah, no, I believe him too. I mean, he came later on, but yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah, and you can look at FBI files. I think there's one Flyjack posted on the Drop Zone a couple of months ago. I want to say it's from like 76 or 78. It's like, hey, we have to have this meeting to see where we're going to go with the DB Cooper case. Does anyone have any ideas? Does anyone have any leads? Because we're all out of ideas.
100%.
And that's only a few years after the skyjacking, but then they continued to work the case up until, maybe 2016.
Yeah, for sure. Well, of course, Larry created the Citizen Sleuths, and that's what brought in Tom K, which got us, the diatoms and the tide particles. So he should definitely get his credit for that, because that was awesome.
Oh yeah, it's so interesting that the only forensic work done in this case is done by a civilian.
that totally blows me away, man. A paleontologist, no less. So it's not like
right.
Some big connection to true crime sleuthing. You know what I mean? Drew, I don't know if you're still here, but he was asking, what do you think the deal is with Brian Ingram? Probably the most fun part about that is Colbert's conspiracy that some guy says that, hey, you see those guys over there, they're going to dig up the Cooper money, and then that's like his linchpin that connects Rackstraw to everything. But I don't actually know anyone that believes that theory other than Colbert.
Yeah, and I can tell you that Brian Ingram really doesn't like that theory and doesn't enjoy it.
I can imagine that he does not.
I talked to him probably 18 months ago. He said he would come on the show as long as I had no affiliation with Tom Colbert.
I can understand that.
And I think he's changed his mind. He hasn't come on the show. I haven't heard from him. But I don't think he's really into being involved in this case.
Yeah.
A lot of primary people in this case, it was just something that happened to them. It wasn't something they chose to be involved in. And so 50 years of being questioned about this event that just happened to you, not something that you chose to be involved with. I could see that being quite annoying.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I mean, it's like, I imagine it was said, well, I know the family dealt with some issues after, with the whole legal thing and the crap that got dug up on his dad. I believe they resolved all of that stuff. But
yeah, and in Jeffrey Gray's book, he talks about the Cooper curse and maybe that affected them. I'm not a real believer in the Cooper curse. I think it was just what happened to their family probably would have happened whether or not they found DB Cooper money on Tina Barr.
Yeah, and I think that stuff, similar things could have almost happened to any family that would have found, money on Tina Barr. You're kind of just dealing with the, not consequences, but kind of the reaction of the situation. Here is Jay Holiday. Was Himmelschneider a help or a hindrance?
I assume he means Himmelsbach.
That's what I assume.
I think he helped. I think he really wanted the case solved. I think one of the reasons that towards the end of his life, towards the end of his career, he was angry at Cooper was because he didn't solve this case. There's this thing happened right before he retired. I think he wanted to be the one to lock him up, to walk him into the courtroom with his hands in cuffs behind his back. I think he wanted to be the one to solve the case. And so as the years went on, I think Himmelsbach sort of embellished certain details about Cooper to make him look bad. He was rude. Right. He used foul language. He was a slimy, no good crook. What the evidence we have doesn't agree with any of those statements from Himmelsbach. So in my opinion, I believe he was just angry that the case was still unsolved and now has his name attached to this unsolved case. He much rather would have had his name attached to being the one that arrested Cooper.
So, what's your reaction to the sentiment that you and Bruce brought up on the Vortex pod that Cooper is back there with one of the stews for this missing amount of time, and something happens back there with Cooper and one of the stews, and that's Himmy's reason for calling him all these names? Do you think that kind of just like that story snowballed as time went on, or do you think there's actually anything to that?
I'm not sure if there's anything to that. It could just be a juicy detail that got repeated by a couple of people.
Right.
The only two people I heard that from were Bruce Smith, and then Greg Gossett said that Wolfgang and Tina were making out.
Yes.
And Bruce, I believe, said more like a sexual assault type of a thing.
Right.
I think if something like that happened, it would probably be in the FBI files, and they'd point it out. If Cooper was holding a knife to Florence Schaffner's throat during this, they would point that out because it makes him look like a really bad guy.
Right.
There isn't that detail where he's really evil. I mean, you have Tina being interviewed immediately after the skyjacking saying he was always polite and never unfriendly, that he became annoyed at one point in time, but was never cruel or hostile to them.
Right.
And that's almost a direct quote, kind of paraphrased, but that's what she says immediately after, not, this happened and it was terrible.
100%. Hey, if you could get one of the primaries and they could offer you an alternate angle, such as shining some light on one of those things we just talked about, bringing some new part to the story that's not in the 302s, not previously known, would that be interesting to you for the show?
That would definitely be interesting, but I think, it's been 51 years. All the primaries have said everything they have to say.
True.
All of them have said there's no way I could possibly identify him at this point in time. Yeah. I heard Bill Mitchell say that in person. Yep. Tina mentions that in the Rolling Stone article. I do find it a little annoying. People constantly are like, well, if only I could show Tina a picture of McCoy, if only I could get this picture of my suspect in front of Tina, it would be case closed.
Yeah, it's a no.
No, it's not. It's been 50 years.
Yeah.
Whatever memory she has of him is probably heavily influenced by sketches and by seeing other suspect photos. There just isn't a way that any of the primaries are going to look at a picture or even a video of the suspect and be able to say that's him.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, again, it's so long, as you just said. I mean, it's similar to other cold cases where it's still human memory, and you're also dealing with a time with, basically no digital technology, at least none, personally. I don't know what Jay Holiday means by this. New theory: how Ty was left behind. Coop laid out the chute over the tie on the chair accidentally. The tie left his thoughts and he jumped. In Reno, the crew pulled the chute off the chair and voila. I don't know. You ever heard anything about that one, Darren?
I'm not certain. I know that the tie was left on one of the rear seats. I think, he took the tie off for jumping, of course. Yeah. And I think he intended to take it with him, but forgot it. Just like his notes. He asked for his notes back. I don't think he intended to leave the tie. I do think he forgot it, left it on the plane. But I'm not sure exactly why or how he forgot it.
Real quick on the evidence. So his drinking glass gets mixed back in with the glasses from all the other passengers. The cigarette butts get destroyed by the FBI for no testing. But what about the hair? Right, there's a hair on the chair, on the apron, whatever, on the chair. So that kind of is misfiled or whatever, we assume. You have any opinion on lost evidence?
Yeah, Ryan Burns has done quite a lot of work trying to figure out what happened to that slide with the hair in it.
Yeah.
And it's very unfortunate that we can't find it. Right. If we had the cigarette butts, if we knew where that slide with the hair on it was,
yep.
Then we can do some DNA testing and maybe truly figure out exactly who Cooper was, which would be great. I'd like to address one thing.
Sure.
I hate getting this criticism that, I want the case to remain unsolved. It's totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's usually from people that are big fans of McCoy and Rackstraw will tell me, oh, you want the case to remain unsolved so you can keep your podcast going or your cash cow podcast. I don't make a dime off doing this show. And
Yeah.
I'm genuinely interested in this case. I would love to know who DB Cooper was and what happened when his boots hit the ground.
100%.
I'm not, there's no vested interest for me in keeping this case open or unsolved. I don't think there is for anyone. So criticism is just totally ridiculous.
Yeah, based on what I've seen from you, it appears that you're not trying to keep the podcast going forever. So I would say
I've tried to quit a couple of times and I can't.
Yeah, I say your actions have said anything but that, especially when you're not monetizing the show, which I think you should do. What we should have did was we should have got up a GoFundMe to get Darren to Coopercon, because the amount of work that this guy has done promoting just his Vortex podcast and just promoting the case in general, like it's a crap ton of work, guys. You know, it might seem like listening to an audio podcast is like not a lot of work, but the amount of research Darren does and just getting these guests on, it doesn't happen by itself. You know what I mean? So Darren definitely needs his flowers and his kudos for that. I think that's everything I got for you, sir. I don't really have much else. If you guys have any other closing questions for Darren before we kind of shut down here, we got Coopercon 2022 coming up. My final thought was going to be this. Darren has brought this up many times, but I agree with him 100%. I think the worst thing that could happen to the case is that we get the name of the suspect and he just, like 1971, he passes away in 72 or something, and we get no details about how he pulled off the jump, what he did with the money. None of the questions get answered. In other words, that's worst case scenario. They give us the suspect's name, and then we don't learn anything further about the Vortex. That would literally drive me insane. That cannot happen, Darren. So we got to fix that.
Oh yeah, I'm totally with you on that. That would be the worst way for the case to be solved. We learned the name of the hijacker, but he died in 1987, lived a solitary life, and now we don't get to know the story. In that instance, I think the Vortex continues for a little while as people debate how they're going to fill in the missing details of the story.
Agreed. Yeah, that's what we need, because we want to hear boots on the ground. Where'd he bury the money? What the hell happened to Tina Bar? We need these. You know, I get that it's 50 plus years later, but we need these answers. Real quick before we let you out the door, just because Coopercon is coming up next week. What was your experience like when you emceed and hosted at Coopercon previously, and how did you enjoy yourself?
It was great. Coopercon is a really fun time. I think the best part of Coopercon is just meeting and hanging out with the people that are arguing about this online all day.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you get on one of the forums, there's a lot of, oh, I can't believe you said that. You don't know what you're talking about. I have this experience and you're a total dummy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have all those same people sitting around a table together, eating and drinking, everyone's having a great time. Everyone's getting along.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot different than what you find online. And really, with the exception of maybe one or two people, everyone in the Vortex really does get along and work well together. They're all able to hang out and have a drink and talk about Cooper.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Then shout out to Eric and Nikki. Everyone's going to be at the panels this year. Bruce. And then we shouted some of those names out at the beginning. I think they're doing the socials at Victor 23, the brewery, this year. So should be epic.
And it'll be really exciting to hear what Nikki and Ryan are going to have to say.
Yeah, no, I'm super pumped for that. I wish we could get a little more. We should be pushing you in the live chat right now, Nikki, because you're in there. You got to spill the beans, bud. But yeah, for sure. I even heard there's going to be a couple people from Zodiac World out there at Coopercon this year. So hopefully we can get a little bit of Zodiac side action. But this basically concludes it for the Cooper Chronicles episode 4. Darren Schaefer, he is the host of the Cooper Vortex podcast. Make sure you check that out. Subscribe, follow it, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. Of course, the Darren's channel over on YouTube. I'll have everything in the description. So go subscribe to him there, and Twitter and Instagram. Make sure you guys get this guy because he puts.
Wait, is Chael Sonnen going to be at Coopercon?
Are you screwing me right now, or did someone just say that?
Is that for real, Nikki?
I highly doubt it. Chael's a busy guy. I highly doubt it, but I wouldn't mind knowing more about Chael Suspect, though. I'm a big MMA fanboy, so
it was Nikki and then Daniel Bear, maybe a couple of people really looked into trying to find his suspect, including like getting copies of his parents' high school yearbooks. It really went deep into trying to figure out who his suspect was. And it never went anywhere. And some of the details he has about the suspect and the skyjacking just doesn't seem to fit with what we know about the case.
Yeah.
And he's sort of famous for talking shit. So
he really is. He really is. Ridiculously entertaining guy. I love his channel. I love his MMA commentary. I follow his channel for MMA commentary, and I follow the Cooper Vortex for DB Cooper information. But again, super interesting guy. I mean, he does push the Native American angle, which is interesting. Again, there's that random comment that Cooper looked like he had Native blood. That's kind of like my comparison to that is they said the Zodiac looked like he was of Welsh ancestry. I always have a difficult time looking at like, dude, look at how pale I am. Would you think I'm Sicilian? You know what I mean? I'm Sicilian and Irish. So again, the swarthy thing, I could see Mediterranean, Greek, Italian, Sicilian. I could see that as swarthy. But again, looking at someone and then judging their ancestry based on how they look, it doesn't sit right with me. You know what I mean? Again, it's like,
it's
hey,
hard
there
to
goes Zodiac. He looks Welsh, I guess. Like I've never heard someone say that, except in these cases. But I think we've said it all. Again, make sure you guys head over to the Cooper Vortex, subscribe, follow on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And Darren, thank you very much for coming on. I was hoping to build up to Darren, guys, and get him like, episode 5, episode 10 or something like that, where we actually had some credence going on here. But he reached out and we had to have him on because Darren.
Yeah, I felt left out.
No, you were coming on regardless. I was just trying to like build up some credibility before I got to you. So again, I'm like, here's Darren. He's done 1,000 episodes on the case. He's gonna kind of lay out the this facts while I ask him generic questions here. So you guys know what I do over here at PXF. But I'm gonna keep it going. Hopefully, I can get someone decent next, like Bruce or something. We'll see how Coopercon goes. But also, you'll appreciate this, Darren. I'm going to Tina Bar with Eric on Sunday. So.
Nice.
If I find 195K, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I mean, Marty Andrade would be a good guest also.
Oh, I definitely want him. Yeah, I definitely want him.
Talking about jump survivability, he's the go-to for that.
100%. Yeah, I'm going to read his book. I'm going to reach out to him. I'm probably going to get Dave on. I mean, how hard is it to get Tom? I mean, I know you got him. I know he does like a lot of TV, so I don't know. I don't know if that's difficult down the line, but I might try to shoot for him as well.
Hit him up.
Will do. All right, guys. I think that's it. It looks like we're winding down here, but I appreciate everybody who came through. And of course, Darren, the man, make sure you pop over to his channel, give him a sub, and check out the new book of Darren. You got anything new coming up on your pod, or you're kind of going into chill mode for the holidays?
Not right now. We'll see. It's booking guests is difficult.
I hear. Well, again, hey, you always got me when you want to revisit the Zodiac stuff, and I got.
I don't want to revisit the Zodiac stuff.
I got some new stuff, but I'll take it to you off air. All right, guys, we're gonna fire out here. Thank you everybody who gave questions for Darren, and give us a like, sub, and a share. Until next time, Coopercon2022.com. Go get your tickets. Darren,
thanks for having me on.
We are out. Give us some likes and subs, guys.